Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third session of the first part of this event. This session aims to explore how collaboration and cooperation beyond administrative borders can really accelerate the transition, the energy transition. The stakeholders behind the Clean Energy for CE project is the Interreg Central Europe program, who wanted to know, among others, how Central European territories can be supported through transnational cooperation and tailored governance mechanisms. Regional cooperation plays a role in conflict resolution, particularly on offshore renewable energy, and energy communities are sometimes created across borders. Speaking from the Tandem, the COBREN, and the Clean Energy for CE projects, they will all shed some light on the aspects on these aspects and present some practical examples. And now, for the purpose of those just joining us now, I'm very happy to present once again our three distinguished speakers for this session. So we start with Frank Holstein from Deloitte and the COBREN project. Frank is a manager within Deloitte's consulting services working on EU policy. He is especially involved in projects contributing to EU policy development, including policy evaluations and studies for ESPON, the European Commission, European Investment Bank, and Eurostat. Frank has 10 years of professional experience in policy research with a focus on EU cohesion policy, territorial development, European territorial cooperation, and multi-level governance. Then we also have on my right Teresa McLaugan Vanova from the Clean Energy for CE project. Teresa is a project manager with extensive experience in policy, innovation, consulting, and international cooperation. Teresa currently works for the Association of Managers of Local Energy Managers, where she leads national and international projects in energy transition, planning, and capacity building. And she's also been actively involved in major EU-funded initiatives from Horizon and the LIFE programs. Previously, she managed the EIB Elena project of a Prague renewable energy community and led technology transfer and energy research at the University Center for Energy Efficient Buildings. She also serves as a senior analyst at Unico Analytics, supporting clients with technology-driven innovation. Then, last but not least, we have Gabriele Galassi, representing the Tandem project. Gabriele is a consultant at Ecoris and holds a master's degree in European governance from the University of Utrecht. He has been involved in several EU research assistance projects relating to citizen energy, coal and just transition, cross-border cooperation, as well as more generally regional development. He's been involved in, he has been involved in projects for the European Commission, European Parliament, the Horizon and LIFE programs too. Gabriele is currently part of the Citizen Energy Advisory Hub for DG ENER and the LIFE European Energy Community Facility. He's previously been involved in the design of and moderation of workshops on cross-border energy communities on behalf of DG Regio. Now, once again, I would like to, before going to the questions to the panelists, I want to remind you, the audience, that you can ask questions too. We've had some very interesting questions coming in the last panel discussions, so the invitation is warmly open once again. But importantly, we also want to ask you, our audience, some questions as we go along the discussion today. The results of your answers will be the subject of an open discussion amongst our panelists. So please log on. You can do so through scanning, or you can go onto the slido.com website and enter the ESPON code, and your answers will indeed be reflected on by our panelists. So, for the opening question, Teresa, as I just mentioned, the key stakeholder behind your project is the Interreg Central Europe program. I'd like to ask you, how can cooperation improve governance mechanisms and solutions for integrated policy making at the transnational, national, regional and local governance levels, all of this being in view of supporting the transition to a climate neutrality by 2050?
Thank you for the question, Blair. Welcome to the session. I must say, from the analysis we did for the project Clean Energy for CE, the strongest takeaway that I've brought with regards to transnational cooperation, that this actually transnational cooperation that helps to close the governance and capacity gaps. And from kind of observing how this is happening, I would say there's 3 key points how and why this is happening. Transnational cooperation allows you to align fragmented governance systems. So by shared learning and policy harmonization and joint planning, I think it enables to kind of close some of the gaps we can observe in certain regions between the national and regional level or national local level. Second thing that transnational cooperation supports is access to expertise for local authorities. It provides them with, for the time being, with experts, and it helps them to develop maybe their strategic plans, to decide what actions to be taken, and it also introduces them to replicable models that then they can later try and implement in their territories. And third, I think it kind of increases mutual accountability and also supports knowledge transfer. And we've seen it kind of happening in the likes of Germany or Austria. We have these regional platforms that kind of work together and influence each other. Croatia or Hungary, there the kind of regional agencies close the gaps and play an important role in supporting energy transition. We also know that there are some areas that could be improved when it comes to transnational cooperation. We have come across that the tools developed maybe sometimes were too complex, maybe sometimes too far ahead. An example was we had a really kind of interesting, innovative tool, and the decision-making on the local level could be done based on the emissions saved per project, but this kind of came to a kind of contrast to what the reality at local authorities are, where the decision-making is actually quite often done based on financial aspects of projects rather than what the CO2 savings are. But we still think that's a kind of way forward, something to be used. Other things we've noticed is that sometimes the tools could be fragmented or maybe not translate into the local languages, or differing legislative frameworks then maybe hinder the full implementation of outputs developed in these projects.
Very interesting, Teresa. So based on what you've just mentioned, as well as the work that you've been carrying out, what would be the main recommendations then that you would put forward to accelerate the energy transition at the different governance levels?
Yeah, well, starting from the top, I must say, definitely on the EU level, keep continuing funding these programs. I think they're really important, essential to push the energy transition forward. However, I would recommend make them more accessible, even for smaller local authorities. Then maybe try to harmonize also the tools, and especially the data tools that you're using and the indicators, so that there is a kind of comparison among the programs. When it's for the national level, I think important is the joint planning. So for the national level also to plan with the region and local levels ahead, involve them in the process, because we've seen that it is not the case in all the regions that we've been following in our project. Excuse me. So make sure that there are also some shared responsibility, so these levels just don't operate in silos. Keep on financing, because we do know that the national level also provides substantial amount of saving combined with the EU funds. And on the regional level, what proved to be very successful are those regional intermediaries. So being it regional energy agency or regional energy platforms. So I think supporting them, that really helps to bring all the actions to the level. And for the local authorities, as has been mentioned before, it is really important to have a person dedicated on the local level that will have energy and climate transition in their agenda.
Many thanks, Teresa. I'd like to turn to you now, Frank. What forms of territorial cooperation have you been experiencing in your project relating to offshore renewables? Has there been a significant role to play of territorial cooperation on this topic?
Yet definitely cooperation plays an important role, and we observe it very much on two different levels. So on a more higher strategic level, as well as much more concrete in different projects. So maybe to start with, like the strategic level, we see for each different kind of sea basin, there are different kind of documents or different kind of political support or committees out there which are supporting the development of offshore renewable energy. And these documents, they contribute to policy coordination, to making sure, okay, who are the stakeholders around the sea that are all there, that are relevant for offshore renewable energy, that they come together. And they also address a lot of how to deal with legal or administrative or financial barriers. Maybe to put it as an example out there, like I have a figure which shows a bit, okay, what do those strategic documents purely do? So if we have a renewable energy development in the middle of the sea, those elements need to be connected to shore. And this is a figure from the European Commission, the communication on offshore renewable energy. And what happens, and this is on the right-hand side, in many cases you can simply have offshore renewable energy and you can make a grid connection to one country. But in order to make best use of energy grids, where is demand and where is potential, these kind of documents, they allow to actually make those connections, making sure maybe to connect offshore renewable energy, wind farms in many cases, to interconnectors, which are all crossing our European seas. So that is, in those political documents, they are enabling that. So they are putting out the objectives there. They are making this visible. These are, if we want to make most efficient use of that, they are doing that. Just to illustrate also, we have a map which shows that, even though we have offshore renewable energy, it's very imbalanced around Europe. And I will not go into the detail, but I think even at European level, what you would see is that it's very imbalanced across Europe. And we can use our seas much more to make those kind of linkages across Europe. So wherever we have wind available at one point, to make these linkages to another part. So really using our seas in a much more strategic part. So we have, different documents. So this can be macro-regional strategies. They are for different sea basins out there. We have a much more specific sea basin strategies as well, particularly in the North and Baltic Sea. So the North Sea, they have the North Sea Energy Council, for example, or in the Baltic Sea there is a document also laying this groundwork for the different kind of interconnectors. So this kind of documents, they are more at strategic level, political level, giving the framework, making sure that it's being put on the political agenda. That is on one hand. On the other hand is much more practical and really project level, where we see a lot of cooperation happening as well. We have a very concrete project when we talk about still heavy infrastructure elements. So this is, for example, projects financed by the Connecting Europe facility, which are really financing wind farms, for example. But we actually see most projects more in the research field. So in the Horizon 2020 program, and there were more than 60 projects in the field of offshore renewable energy, leveraging 185 million euro. And this kind of projects, they pull together the kind of resources, both knowledge-wise as well as funding-wise from different parts of Europe, but how can we advance offshore renewable energy? So this is much more, the research projects much more soft power, but particularly if we want to move forward in offshore renewable energy, we see really still a need there. If you look at the map, it's pretty busy in the North Sea. In current kind of offshore renewable energy. The other sea basins, there is less offshore renewable energy, but that's also the territories are sometimes more challenging there. So we look at very different types of technologies which are required there. So we look much more at floating wind energy, for example, or tidal energy or wave energy, which need to be deployed there. And there is much more still a need for diving into the research, how can we best do that? So their cooperation and pulling together the resources is helping there. Interreg, of course, has also a role to play in there. And we had a look into the current Interreg programs. So from the Interreg programs, at transnational level or cross-border level, that have a connection with the sea. So there are 53. 35 of them actually allow for projects in offshore renewable energy. That is to say, they either have the objective, a specific objective related to support of renewable energy. It does not specify whether they do it maritime, so offshore or on land, but since the program has the sea connection, they could do it at sea. Or they have one of the fields of interventions that touch upon supporting offshore renewable energy. So there we see also, there is support, but again, this is mostly in terms of a lot of enabling conditions, so lots of visibility studies or for offshore renewable energy or creating awareness on this. Interreg is not doing the major financing of big installations or infrastructure, but much more at the enabling factors. So those are the two levels that we mostly observe.
Very interesting, Frank, and what I find particularly interesting, I'm sure much of the audience will share the same sentiment of these beautiful maps that you've created in the project. Congratulations. Many of them seem like very creative pieces of art. We could make a nice museum exhibition out of them. Perhaps to follow up on you, Frank, briefly, on the topic of planning. What were the key planning challenges observed in projects that hamper the collaboration in renewable energy, in offshore renewable energy?
I would have one particular example coming in mind. That's one of the case studies that we have done, which is a case study focusing on the development of a floating wind turbine in the Black Sea off the coast in Bulgaria. So they have developed the technology is there. They have the right people to put that out. The technology is actually developed in France. They have actually a floating wind turbine out of the coast of Brittany in France, so they know it's working. It's there. Now this project was trying to transfer this idea, this knowledge from one end to Europe to the other end. And there the project partners come a lot of hurdles and challenges, and there the planning comes in. So even though they thought, okay, we can put our technology here and we can use it as showcase offshore renewable energy, they realized in the current maritime spatial planning plan in Bulgaria, this is Bulgarian waters, offshore renewable energy is not as such like portrayed in the maritime spatial planning plan with a dedicated zone. So they had an issue finding or the location where they were allowed to put this floating wind turbine. So that are kind of the planning challenges that are there. It's maybe technically it's easily to launch this kind of technologies all across Europe, but still administrative-wise or legal-wise, the different developers, they need to come across a lot of challenges of how to make sure, we can actually implement our project correctly.
Very good. Thank you very much, Frank. So perhaps Gabriele, over to you now. You've been working quite extensively on the topic of energy communities, of course. In your experience and in the project that you're working on, have you come across cross-border cooperation to create energy communities?
Thanks a lot for the question, Puyan. I think that reflecting on what is the essence of cross-border cooperation on energy is a fundamental introduction that we need to make at this stage. So we're talking about bordering territories that jointly decide to share a renewable energy plant or to manage it and to jointly benefit from it. And as was pointed out previously as well, surely the European Commission, in the presence of DG Ener and DG Regio, is one of the fundamental institutions supporting cross-border cooperation on energy. And in terms of means, surely both Interreg and the Connecting Europe facility are key funding instruments supporting this type of cooperation. Specifically talking about energy communities in cross-border territories, I would like to mention a fundamental document that was published at the very start of this year, and it's the Handbook on Cross-Border Energy Communities that was developed by DG Regio. This handbook is a piece that basically clarifies what is a cross-border energy community, and also starts analyzing what is the landscape in Europe for this specific initiative, and how it is looking, especially ahead for the future for this specific type of project. Now, going back to what is an energy community, of course, when talking about cross-border energy communities, we do assume and take the key fundamental characteristics of this initiative. So we need to have a renewable energy installation that produces energy, and it is owned by the citizens and that live in its proximities. And such installation is then the energy that it provides and produces is also consumed by the citizens living nearby, and by this the citizens are defined prosumers. As such, a cross-border energy community, as clarified by the DG Regio Handbook on Cross-Border Energy Communities, is an energy community that enshrines this cross-border element. So where there is an exchange activity, whether that is the production, the consumption, or the management of the energy source in that cross-border territory. Going back to the handbook from DG Regio, one of the key highlight of the document was that we are now in a moment of a very much of a starting phase for cross-border energy communities, and hence why the concept of quasi cross-border energy communities is a useful concept to also understand how initiatives on the way to become cross-border energy communities do have the potential for becoming that specific initiative, and how are they working. As such, quasi cross-border energy communities do have a cooperation, a collaboration element, which is not necessarily the production or the consumption or the management of the energy plant, but also all the other activities that energy communities do deploy and implement in their lifespan. So considering this aspect, it also used to mention that under the framework of the Renewable Energy Community Advisory Hub and with the support of DG Regio, we participated and moderated a series of cross-border workshops in 3 border territories in the EU around autumn 2023, in which we did put different stakeholders together on a cross-border territory, and we discussed the challenges, the obstacles, but also the drivers and the potential way forward for creating cross-border energy communities in their territories. And finally, we come to ESPON Tandem, in which we have analyzed how the cross-border cooperation as a local practice is an important driver and factor that supports the realization of an energy community or a citizen energy initiative in a specific cross-border territory. And with that in mind, we have analyzed 2 specific case studies, one at the border between Spain and Portugal, and one at the border between Germany and Denmark. The one at the border between Spain and Portugal is a very interesting initiative, because the key actor there is the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation of Duero Douro, that back in 2018 to face the issues that were coming from the remoteness of the territory, and that were not allowing the citizens of the area to have a 24/7 supply of electricity. So the EGTC decided to create its first energy cooperative. So they established the cooperative, and they basically manage a number of PV installations distributed in the territory, and this energy cooperative is the key distributor for the area. Alongside that, EFI Duero, which is the energy cooperative, is also providing and realizing charging stations in the border between Spain and Portugal. On the other end, we have Grenstrom, which is the other case study that we analyzed under Tandem, in which we have seen that the cooperation and the border between Germany and Denmark made it possible to have the wind installation in the German territory, but with the shareholders coming both from the Denmark side of the border and also from the German side of the border. This is also a really interesting example of cross-border cooperation on energy.
Thanks a lot, Gabriele. Very interesting to hear. Perhaps just to be crystal clear, for my own sake and also for the sake of the audience at home, what's the point of making a cross-border energy community? What's the added value? Why is it worth the effort? Because I think that there are quite some complexities in trying to achieve it, right? But what's really the end goal? Where's the added value?
That's a very good question, Pujan. Thanks for this. And I would answer taking some of the results also from my master thesis, because the cooperative culture of a local territory is a key element that drives the realization of energy communities in Europe. And when looking at the specific examples of the case studies that are mentioned in the ESPON Tandem, but also out of the 27 cases that were mapped within the DG Regio Handbook on Cross-Border Energy Communities, we see that these territories are realities in which the cooperative culture is a traditional element that has been there for ages, and that is a key characteristic of these borders, and the citizens also are more prone to cooperate, especially on the matter of energy, given the times we live in. for example, realize these specific projects as cross-border energy communities. Then, of course, we do have the environmental benefits of an energy community because you do reduce the CO2 emission of the local energy system by using a renewable energy plant. You do provide the local citizens with lower bills by having them jointly participate in an energy community. But most importantly, you do make citizens not only aware, but active actors within the energy transition. And it is important to not forget that the transition is possible only if we are able not to leave anyone behind.
Thanks very much, Gabriele. I fully take your point on the added value. Okay, so I'd like to ask a question to the panelists on the Interreg program, as we've already heard quite some mention of it, but I'd like to be perhaps a little bit more precise to understand what specific Interreg projects have you come across that have been funded on the energy transition, which are quite interesting. I mean, I know, Frank, you were alluding to this earlier, but they're not for the largest scale projects, but perhaps rather for testing cooperation and innovation. Teresa and Gabriele, perhaps I start with you, Teresa. In your project, did you come across many Interreg projects? And if so, what sort of nature were they?
We did. Just to clarify, our analysis was not aimed at analyzing specific projects. We more looked at the transition as it happens in the area. But saying that, with almost all the case studies that we produced, each one of the regions had some kind of experience with Interreg programs or other types of transnational cooperation. And I think that's symptomatic because it shows that if you want to kind of go forward, you cannot just kind of stay and do things. It's not business as usual. You kind of have to go out of your comfort zone. And sometimes this kind of needs some kind of encouragement from outside. One of the interviewees, and just to illustrate, told us, yeah, we had this really great idea and came to our managers. However, they were kind of skeptical and saying like they were too careful about should we implement it. It's something that has not been done before. And then the Interreg program came in that they participated in, and 2 years later when they came back and said like this is how it works in other states, they were very in favor to do that. So I think this is what Interreg programs do in general. Other types that we've seen are for the cross-border ones, as Gabrielle mentioned. I think that's great that it kind of facilitates this, what naturally has been. I mean, borders are just lines on the paper. However, the kind of locality in the territory is there. And we've seen it in cross-border types of projects between Hungary and Romania, in our case, all other ones as well. So I think that's really important. And also, in one of the cases, like Bratislava, when they started the process, we not started, but one of the first steps they did was develop a SECAP within an international project. And taking from there, they kind of came milestones and implementing things as they go along.
Thanks, Teresa. Very interesting to hear. Gabriele, was Interreg directly involved in any of the cross-border energy communities that you've come across? Or quasi-cross-border communities, or any activities of similar nature?
Absolutely. Interreg is, as we said before, is a fundamental instrument of the European Union to facilitate and strengthen cross-border cooperation, especially on the matter of energy. And indeed, both in the DG Regio handbook on cross-border energy communities, and as well in the workshop that we did last year on in these cross-border territories, several Interreg projects came out, and we actually approached them, especially in the workshop, as a potential basis to build on for future potential cross-border energy communities. The majority of these projects are focused, for example, on the tourist sector. So we're talking about electric cars routes at the border between Spain and Portugal. Mentioned is the Garveland project between Andalusia and Algarve. And then we do also have these examples of these touristic routes for electric bikes at the border between Italy and Slovenia in the region of Nova Gorica. But also we do have let's say a broader element of cross-border cooperation for energy communities brought by projects that are financed under Interreg and that do support the realization of energy communities in different countries, and we do have there the share of experiences and knowledge from different stakeholders and regions in Europe, which is in essence a cross-border cooperation.
Thanks, Gabriel. Teresa, would you like to respond to?
I just may add just a small thing. There's one project that's related to energy communities that's supported by the Interreg Center Europe that we came across, and I think illustrates very nicely what it does is the Hercules. And there's 12 partners from the area, and I think half of them are experienced ones, the other half are the kind of new to be established energy communities. And it's a great example how you can learn from each other and support each other in the learning and coming especially with energy communities.
Fantastic to hear. So now I think is the time we'd like to ask our audience some questions again. So please, I kindly invite you to connect once again to Slido, whether through scanning the QR code or going on the Slido website and entering the ESPON code. The first question which we would like to ask, it's a bit of a tricky one, but it's one that we would really take great benefit from your thoughts on. So we do ask for your patience and brain power for this. But what we want to know is what kind of factors and triggers are needed to utilize more the Interreg program for energy transition projects. So we leave this as a bit of an open cloud question. But we have a nice amount of responses already. So who would like to reflect on one of these answers? So we see a more targeted stakeholder engagement. What do we think is implied by this? Does the Interreg program perhaps not engage so much in targeted stakeholder engagements for this, or how do we see this? Or perhaps local strategies and prioritization. What do our speakers think in this regard? Or perhaps we don't necessarily agree with any of these suggestions.
For the stakeholder engagement, I can imagine they might also relate to the energy community who is not always that familiar with Interreg. And I think there might be...
You mean the practitioner, the energy community, the practitioners within the energy sector?
Exactly. So
they might not be so familiar with.
Yeah, and that's something that we came across, at least in some of our case studies in the work, what we have done, like in particular when we talk to the developers of offshore renewable energy, they look very much upon their perspective from the national perspective, what is in there from that regard. The research projects, they usually look wider, but they're not all familiar with the different opportunities, such as Interreg, to actually tap into this kind of resources to make better use of cross-border or transnational cooperation.
Very good point, Frank. And I think that feeds into the third response, which is better circulation of opportunities. Perhaps one of the key things that the Interreg program can do is disseminate further and more broadly, or perhaps in a more targeted, more broadly, in a targeted manner, the opportunities to those relevant stakeholders who could be eligible as potential beneficiaries of the program. Good. Perhaps we can go to the second question now. And this is on what are the challenges for international cooperation on the energy transition? So we're talking both on cross-border and transnational level, and looking whether, key barriers are regulatory, administrative, financial, technical, legal, communication, and cultural. How do we see the responses here, Gabriela? I see you have your hand up.
From my side and perspective, I definitely agree with what the audience is answering to this question. Going back to the case studies that we did for the Espon Tandem project, we saw that the regulatory complexity of two different countries on specific sectors, such as, for example, the energy one, is a key barrier for the establishment of a cross-border energy community, but not only for the establishment of such specific entity. For the Douro European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation struggled immensely in creating a distributing enterprise both in Portugal and Spain at the same time. The process was way quicker in Spain compared to Portugal, and this inevitably hindered the final realization of the cross-border energy community.
Any further thoughts or reflections on the responses here? Are you surprised to see these? What we see is nobody really thinks that cultural differences are hindering international cooperation on energy transition. Does this mean that there is a lot of compatibility then? People, the respondents, think that cultural differences are not a barrier for cooperation on energy transition. Energy speaks no language or is of no color or culture. Yeah, any reflections?
No, I think mostly the regulatory administrative plus the financial is also something that we observe from the maritime perspective in offshore renewable energy as well. Just already what is considered between different countries as a barrier or as a potential synergy for offshore renewable energy differs greatly between the countries, whether in some countries it's really not allowed to do any offshore renewable energy development in nature protected areas, where some others allow for it under certain conditions. So that is already one part, and then the stakeholders are very diverse as well. So if you talk about the enabling infrastructure, for example, who owns those infrastructure for that would make sure that offshore renewable energy can be transported back to land. In some cases, we talk about national operators for electricity, whereas in some cases it's more regionalized or privatized. And those kind of stakeholders need to be able to communicate to each other. You need to agree upon pricing when we talk about cross-border parts. So those kind of elements, they come into play, more the administrative and financial challenges when we talk about doing things cross-border or even a transnational kind of scale for developing offshore renewable energy.
Right, interesting.
If I may add as well,
yeah, please.
I think it's fair to say that even the pool of respondents we look at is kind of limited, because we look at people who are kind of engaged in transnational cooperation. And I think one of the barriers that is not there, but I've come across in my own line of work, is actually the language barrier.
Ah, yes.
And obviously, for those who cannot be involved because of the language barrier, they won't be voting here. But I think coming back to the targeted stakeholder involvement or engagement, that is something I've seen recently, and I think it's a good move to have maybe even intermediary partners in the Interreg program. So you can quite often see that there's a municipality or local authority, and then there is an expert partner, either being it energy agency or energy advisory. And I think that's a kind of way to kind of bring maybe even small authorities or less language equipped people to the transition, because they have this kind of vehicle that brings them in, and they can all benefit from the cooperation.
Very good. I would like to spend a moment on the third and final question, because I think it's particularly important for the way forwards. The question is, what is the key added value on international cooperation on energy? As I alluded to earlier with Gabriele, it's important that we know the value proposition and why it's worth investing the time, effort and energy to make the international dimension part of an integral part of the energy transition. So it seems we have a very balanced view on what are the key added values. Well, I guess that voters were able to share more than one, were able to select more than one choice, and all of the choices we gave apparently are there. Maybe I can ask the participants on the panel, if you were to select one of these that you would use to champion more than anything on the added value of international cooperation on energy transition, which would you choose? Gabriele, I start with you. And a very short explanation of why.
Given the times we are in, I would say to enhance the energy security and resilience of the electricity systems in cross-border and transnational territories.
Teresa?
I would select enhanced innovation, and the reason being that it encourages you to do things you would probably not think about before.
Very interesting. Last but not least, Frank.
Yes, I would go for data sharing, making sure that we have best knowledge, evidence about where is the potential, what are barriers at play, plus also how to make use best of all of that in terms of what are the stakeholders or what are the different pricing options, so that we can, as efficient as possible, make use of the energy available.
Okay, so I think we're reaching the end of our time slot for this discussion. Once again, I would like to express many thanks to the speakers who have participated for their great inputs and proactive thinking. And again, thanks to them for the great work which they're doing in their projects. But that's not all that we have today. Of course, this afternoon we have two more very interesting sessions taking place. And these will be, with a fresh set of projects and speakers compared to those who were there during the morning. So we'll be discussing, of course, issues related to circularity, and we'll also be discussing issues related to spatial planning and the contributions that this plays towards achieving climate neutrality. So please do stay tuned, do enjoy your lunch, take a break, send some emails or whatever needs doing, take the dog on a walk or anything of the sort. But we do hope to count on your participation in the afternoon, because the discussions as a package are what we need to comprehensively understand what is needed to move towards climate neutral territories. So thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you soon.